Peterborough FM, one station, many communities.
You are listening to Esoteric Discussions with Valentine St. Aubin on Peterborough FM, www.peterborough.fm.
Hello and welcome to Esoteric Discussions with me, your host, Valentine St. Aubin, a show where we go down deep into the rabbit hole. You can catch me every other Wednesday evening from 9 here on Peterborough FM and online. If you want to learn more about me, please visit my website at valentinesaintaubin.co.uk. So it's the 13th of June 2012, and did you miss me? Because I took a short break. I took some time off from the show and turned 40 and cried a bit and drank myself into oblivion, and then bounced back and was quite proud of myself because I think I look quite good for 40. So that's what I've been doing, and I've been very busy as well. I'm just about to get ready. I'm about to tuck into the redrafting of Book 2 of my Possible World series. So I'm actually going to be going into hiding very soon, and I will be keeping myself to myself over the next few months as I wrap up the draft for Book 2. So I'm having a good year, I think, and, well, as much as can be expected with the times that we're in. And I hope that you have been having a good year too, and haven't been getting too carried away with all of the 2012 doom-mongering. Not to say that there aren't important things happening and change isn't afoot, but certainly not the end of the world. Unfortunately, we are still here. Well, I am anyway, and several of us are. So that's how it goes. Yes, and if you live in the Peterborough area, hopefully you enjoyed yourself at the Willow Festival. We were there, Peterborough FM was there, myself and many of my colleagues, like Simon Debe, who was just on before my show started. We were there and we did a live broadcast from the festival, and Paul Newman, who is the host of the Global Midday Jukebox, was actually stuck in the studio and taking in the live feed, and basically had to work all three days and do all the coverage by himself, and he did a fantastic job. And those podcasts are available from his own from if you go onto the website and if you look for Paul Newman and the Global Midday Jukebox, you'll see some of the archived podcasts there. They will eventually make their way onto the homepage of the website as well, some of the highlighted features. So it was good fun and a lot of work, and hopefully, if everything works well, we'll have another Willow Festival next year in 2013. So lots of things happening, and of course here at Peterborough FM, this is a community radio station, meaning this is a radio station put on by volunteers. None of us get paid for what we do. We come here and we do what we do for the love of it, and we give a lot of our time to this station. And we are one of the lucky ones. We have funding and we are on air. We're still trying to get our license sorted out so that we can broadcast 24 hours on the FM band. But we are here, and we are trying to be part of the community, and I think that's what's important for the times ahead, is that there are many of us on the grassroots level trying to do what we can do to get business flowing, to invigorate our communities and try to create some kind of growth. It's not all doom and it's not all gloom, but unfortunately we don't have the big magical wand that can sweep away all of the problems. But there are many of us out there like myself, like my colleagues who work here at Peterborough FM and across the country and worldwide as well, where we are experiencing these financial difficulties. There's plenty of people on the ground level trying to make the most out of what there is to make out of. So it's these are the times that we're in, and these times, as I have been saying, from an astrological point of view, are not going to go away anytime soon. They are going to be with us for a few more years to come. The astrological alignments really won't let go of this phase that we're seeing with the financial systems quite confused until around 2024. So we've got a good 12 more years of the financial system, the issues of corporations getting too big for their britches, for the bankers ripping us off. All these types of themes are going to be going on for many, many more years. And obviously, we still have not seen the bottom fall out yet. So those days are still to come. So, lots of things are happening. And of course, if you have been following me and if you have been listening to some of the things I have said over the months, we are coming up to a very important alignment of Pluto square Uranus. I'm not going to go over that too much tonight because I have spoken about it before in the past, but it's an alignment, it's a square that's very frictional, and we're going to get the first exact hit. That means both of these planets are going to come into a 90-degree alignment exactly. They're very close at the moment, but we're talking about exact alignment. And that will happen on the 24th of June. So that's going to be the first hit. And we're going to have 7 of these alignments take place over the next few years. So we're going to see tensions rise over the summer. I'm not sure exactly what we're going to see. I don't know if we're going to see the disturbance at the Olympics that many people think we might. I really don't know. But anything is possible at this moment. And of course, there's also the climate issue as well that could also step in and show its face. So there's all sorts of things going on out there. And hopefully you're keeping your head and you're making the most of what you can make most of. So tonight I have a very wonderful guest, as all my guests are wonderful. I am going to be joined very shortly by Thomas Sheridan, who is an author. He's written 2 books. The first book was called Puzzling People, Labyrinth of the Psychopath, and that did very well for him. And he has recently written a follow-up book, which came out just in May 2012, and this one is called Defeated Demons, Freedom from Consciousness Parasites in Psychopathic Society. So basically we're going to be talking about the psychopath, and this is one of the things that lets you know that you have grown up, because you tend to come across these types of individuals as you are maturing. They can come to you in a love relationship. They can come to you in a professional relationship. I have worked with many professionals who are psychopaths in my working life, and I have had to fight them. These people are very ruthless. They are not wired the same way that we are. They have a different idea of right and wrong, different morality code to us, and in general, they're just they're very strange individuals. And what I like about Thomas Sheridan's work is that he sees the bigger picture, and the bigger picture is this psychopathic structure is at the root of everything in our society, and the psychopath rules, and that's why the world is as crazy as it is. So he's going to be joining me very shortly. But before then, we're going to take a break. I'm going to play a song, and I'm going to get him on the line. And when I come back, hopefully I will have Thomas, and we're going to get this interview going, because he's got lots of great information to share, and I want to make sure that he has enough time to speak freely. So sit back and relax, and I will be back shortly.
We have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And is the price worth it?
I think this is a very hard choice, but we think the price is worth it.
Right, so I've had success. I finally have made contact with Thomas, and he's on the line. So as I said at the top of the show, Thomas Sheridan is an author and an artist. He's also a musician. If you want to learn more about him, you can visit his website at thomassheridanarts.com. Okay, so let's get going with this conversation, and let's talk about the psychopath, because that's what we're trying to talk about this evening, with your wonderful book that you've written, well, now 2 books that you've written, The Labyrinth of the Psychopath, and then your follow-up as well. So let's get going, because I know you've just come off of a very interesting tour with Ian R. Crane and Brian Gerrish and Max Kaiser and so many other wonderful individuals. So please, first of all, tell me about your experience with that speaking tour, because I know that must have been amazing for you to be part of that. So please do begin with that for me, and tell me how that was for you, and how the audience enjoyed what you had to offer as well.
Well, it was a fantastic experience. I had an amazing time. I was actually quite surprised to be asked to be with the people like John Perkins and Max Kaiser, just because I'm relatively new on the scene, to be on the same bill as a New York Times bestseller and the TV news people, and it was fantastic. And I was very honoured that Ian asked me to do this. And the reason was, Ian said that, what you talk about, the psychopath, it is the common thread that runs through everything that's wrong in the world. Yeah. And indeed, he's right. And the reception I got was phenomenal, especially in London and in Dublin. There was it was just amazing. I was besieged by people after the talks, and it was just, it was just amazing. And so it was kind of like, it kind of validated what has been for me a long journey now, dealing with this subject. And for a long time I was the lone voice in the wilderness. It's very difficult to get people to listen to this, and now to talk in a room in London in front of a couple of hundred people, and they're just lapping it up and then coming up afterwards, including people who are professionals like psychiatrists and clinical psychologists, and they're actually thanking me for doing this, because a non-academic is the only person who can really deliver this message. And as I said, that's what it came from. It was just a lifelong need to understand the root of evil. It's as simple as that. Yeah. And through a series of, quite an interesting life that I've had, doing a lot of traveling and being involved in sort of very interesting fields of work, the psychopath and my understanding of the psychopath became the catalyst, the sort of the base metal, the ultimate solvent of all this. You're going to use sort of an alchemical, motif behind all this evil was the sudden realization about 4 years ago, or 3 years ago, that it just dawned on me in a very sort of noetic and symbolic way that the psychopath, it represents 4% of the human race that lives among us, but they're a different kind of person. This puzzling person is something very, very different. Mm-hmm. And, all my work has led me to believe that what we're dealing with here is an issue of consciousness. There's two consciousness on this planet. There's empathic consciousness, people like us who actually care about others, who mm-hmm. actually care about the impact of our life and our behaviors on others. Even if we're not saints, even if we make mistakes and do selfish things, we still know that we've done wrong, and we try to make amends for that. We try to apologize, or just try and say sorry in our own way. We know we've done wrong and we have remorse. But there's 4% of the human race that represent a predatory negative consciousness, and they have absolutely no remorse, no compassion, and they go through life just using everybody and anything they can, deceiving, manipulating, and destroying anyone that gets in their way. And it's as simple as that. There's two consciousness on this planet fighting for domination. The good news is we're the majority. The better news is that we're actually waking up with this parasite that lives amongst us. Mm-hmm. And so ultimately my message is one of a healing for humanity. It's not a negative message. It's like, okay, we're at war. Now we know how the enemy works. Now it's time to save ourselves.
Yes, I think that's a really good way to put it. And I think also maybe why so many people have tapped into your work is because so many of us have experienced these psychopaths in our own personal lives, whether it be in, your personal relationships or in a professional way. I know for myself, I've crossed them many times in the professional world. And I know that you talk about in your early years, you worked on Wall Street and you came across these types of individuals, these psychopathic individuals within the banking sector. I worked within PR, and I later worked in higher education, and I also came across these types of individuals in those arenas as well. And I think that is what also touches so many people when they're picking up your book and they're reading it, because it's very real, it's tangible, and it's one of those things as well. It's very commonsensical. It's like, oh yes, of course, I get that, I understand that, but it's someone had to put the correct words into play to bring it down to the level of everyday and make it accessible for everybody. So I think that's also one of the main reasons why your work has been widely accepted and enjoyed as well. And I like also what you have to say about now the structures and the architecture that runs the world that we understand. Do you want to go into, because from your point of view, from what I understand, the psychopath is the root to everything, isn't it? It's the path.
Yeah, and it probably always has been. If I was talking to a Jungian analyst there the other day, and we were talking about fairy tales, and he said to me, we were talking about why do you think fairy tales are so powerful and have lasted so long, particularly in a European context. And I just said, well, they're probably true. And then he laughed and says, yet they are true, because they're warning us in a pre-psychological age, in a pre-sort of Freudian, Jungian, age. Fairy tales were used to convey motifs of individuals and situations that were negative for humanity, but they couldn't address them directly for various reasons, probably back in the olden days because of religion, and dangers of heresy and so on. But today, we still have the same problem. We still have this predatory consciousness that is in control of the world. We still, our history is filled with stories of princes and kings and dukes and barons and business leaders and popes and pontiffs and so on who were psychopathic towards the people, but they were portrayed almost as the mythological figures. Even when we say mythology, we talk about someone like, Prince Prospero from, Edgar Allan Poe's The Masque of the Red Death. He's an obvious psychopathic individual in that motif, but also if you were to put it even into the real world, like the Borgias.
Yes, yeah. That's very big at the moment as well, isn't it, the Borgias?
They're even more mythologized, even though they were very real people.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing today. We watch a film like Wall Street with Michael Douglas, and the people say to themselves, oh, well, yeah, we know Wall Street is like that. It's just like Michael Douglas. But it's actually worse than that, and it's more real than that. They're always trying to make us mythologize the psychopath, whether it's movies like American Psycho and so on like that. It's always external somehow to our everyday experience. And the reality is that the psychopaths have, not through their genius or their brilliance, but through their deviousness and their manipulation and the destruction of others around them, have risen to the top now of just about every sector of society, and particularly the most powerful ones: media, bioagricultural, bioengineering, the military-industrial complex, and the finance system. These are the four horsemen of the apocalypse when you want to really think about it, that are coming at us. This is the plague, pestilence, and disease, and so on, that are coming at us. Now, there's a need, I felt, that people have to be told. See, when I first started looking into this scene, there was a lot of stuff out there that was very sort of like, I'm not discounting it completely, but this idea of reptilians and,
the David Icke, yes.
Okay, maybe as an allegory, fair enough, but it was much more simple than that. There was scientific and actual real-life reasons why these people behaved like that, and if we really wanted to make a difference, we had to actually approach them on this playing field, saying, look, you have a diagnosable condition, behavior, or whatever it is, whatever caused it, whatever was put into you, and this is the problem. And my attitude is, I was talking to somebody today about it, and I says, what my work does and why it's taken off so rapidly is because there's no emotional aspect really attached to it. I actually approach this issue, the psychopathic issue, in the same way we're dealing with a virus or a bacteria. We have to quarantine it, get it away from us, and have no serious emotional attachment to it. And I think this is what's really taken off, because I'm actually presenting people with a toolkit rather than actually a hysterical response. So it gives people an empowering message. It says to them, look, here's what they are, here's how they work. Then we just get away from them, we ignore them, and do not be in a highly emotional state about it any more than you're in a highly emotional state when you put your wheelie bin out in the curb to be collected. It's the same kind of process. We have an issue here, we approach it with modern minds, and the modern mind is that we deal with it in a matter-of-fact way. And ironically, Valentine, it really isn't a modern way. It's the same way that native and indigenous folk have always dealt with the psychopath. Very matter-of-fact, this is a danger to the tribe, and it must be dealt with and made an outcast. And that's so really, I'm bringing it all back home to what we used to be as people.
Yeah, and I think that's so important to focus on. Lots of people, and I found this when I was working when I was working in the office world, which I no longer do anymore, because I had so many run-ins with psychopaths, and I had to say to myself, look, I want to approach my life from a different direction, and I have to tackle these people from a different direction, and I cannot sit next to them every day and take them and have them feed off my energy in that way. But also, but in saying that, we cannot be afraid of them. And I did find that people in the professional world often were afraid because they could spot that the behavior was not right, but they were a bit afraid of how to take that head on, because they didn't want to have to fight these people themselves. And I think we do need to, as a group, as a collective, stop being afraid of these people. It's like with our politicians. Stop looking up at them and expecting them to have all the answers, because, again, these are the psychopathic characters, the politicians, the people that are running things. They feed off of our intimidation and our naivety to allow them to spin circles around us, because people are looking at them like there's some kind of king, high priestess that have all the answers. We need to stop being so afraid. So how would you say to an individual, how can we as a collective group, we have spotted the psychopath, we know that they're running things in our world, how can we then approach them and do something about it? Is it possible?
Well, yeah, it's very possible, and there's no reason to be afraid, because we as human beings are the most remarkable organism in the universe, and a psychopath is nowhere near our level. They're inferior to us, and they can't play on the same playing field that we're on. All they can do is drag us down to their level through intimidation, through bullying, through sexual games, through mind games, through propaganda, through playing on our insecurities. So what they do is they drag us down to their frequency level, which is very, very, very low. And then they're in a position of power. We're intimidated. We're not used to playing at that level. We're not like that. We're instinctually human beings do not want to hurt each other. I've been all over this world and met all kinds of people, and the vast majority of people are really nice. They just want an easy life.
Yes, most people, yes. I agree.
They want to create and not bother anybody. But the psychopath is the sort of like, it's the grit in the ointment. They're actually ruining us. They're actually damaging us in terms of our own evolution as a species. I'm talking about all the evolution, particularly the consciousness evolution. They're actually holding us back, because we are on the cusp of an explosion in human consciousness that hasn't been seen probably for 100,000 years, when the development of the prefrontal cortex of the human being took off with the creation of art and language. And we're heading the same way again. And there's going to be no place for them in the future. So the only hope they have now is to destroy us as a species, destroy the food, destroy the water, destroy the air, destroy our minds, bring us down to their level through their horrific TV shows that play on the most appalling aspects of the human condition that are not actually even natural in our human beings. They've been imposed upon us since the time of Edward Bernays and his appalling book, Public Relations and Propaganda, back in the 1920s. And this is what they've always wanted to do to us. How do you deal with them in a personal situation? You just get the hell away from them and learn everything about psychopaths.
Yeah, I agree with that.
When you know about psychopaths, you have a firewall around your consciousness.
Yeah. So it's such an... Sorry, Thomas, go ahead.
In terms of the big picture, I was just going to say non-compliance. Just, don't play their games, don't join their army, don't fight in their oil wars, don't watch their TV, certainly don't buy their newspapers, and learn how to be as self-sufficient as possible, and understand that you as a human being have a higher purpose and a greater destiny than being fodder for the psychopathic control grid.
You've said we've only had a very short time to talk, and I do apologize for that. And you've got so much to offer and so much to share. And I would very much like to have you come back, if it's okay with you, if you have the time.
Oh, absolutely. I'd be delighted to come back.
Because there's much more here that we need to talk about, much more. And we need to also address your follow-up book to the first book, because I'm interested to see exactly where this research has taken you in respect to your follow-up work as well. So we're running out of time here, so I'm going to end the conversation for tonight, Thomas, and I do apologize for the technical difficulties that we did have, and if you can just stay on the line, and I'll come back to you in a couple of minutes while I just close the show down, if that's okay.
I'll be here.
Okay. So that was Thomas Sheridan, and if you liked that, I would very much encourage you to have a look at his website, thomassheridanarts.com, and He's got a great YouTube channel as well with some very, very interesting videos, all sorts of things. He's, as you can hear, he's a man who's very much tapped into the consciousness level that we're at the moment. And I'm always very careful about who I have on my show, because I do believe the message is so very important, and that you're getting the message from the right people. And he's definitely one of them. Right, so it's what's the date today? It's the 11th of July 2012, and I'm back again for another session of esoteric discussions. We've had all sorts of things going on in the last couple of weeks. We've had Uranus and Pluto make its first square. That was around the 24th of June, and since then we've had the Barclays issue with the LIBOR situation. And we've had all sorts of other things going on as well. So it's been a very busy time, certainly very stressful on many people, a lot going on, a lot of tension. I'm hearing about, I just heard a headline earlier today from RT News about in Spain about plastic bullets being used on the crowd who have been protesting against the austerity measures. Of course, you know, if you get hit by a plastic bullet, it does hurt you. It may not kill you, but it can harm you. So we certainly have had a very busy time, and it's going to keep intensifying. I don't want to keep going over certain things I have discussed, so you can always go back into the archives to learn more about the astrological scene that's going on, but we're going to be having a few more of these squares between Uranus and Pluto in the next couple of years, which is going to cause people to want to overthrow, those that control us, and those that control us are going to want to tighten up their reign of terror on us further. So definitely interesting times. And you know, you've heard me talk about this in many of the shows that I've done over the past year. I've been talking about the times that we're in. We're in very interesting times. All times are interesting, of course. There's you know, every time is important, but we are in particular in a very stressful period of time with lots of changes coming our way. So, you know, if you're having a hard time out there, know that you're not alone, because so many of us are struggling. So many of us are struggling financially, emotionally. Our lives are changing. Uranus is the planet of unexpected change and revolution, and Pluto is all about control. So these types of issues will be popping up in our own personal lives as well. So, you know, we have all of that to look forward to. And if we didn't have enough things to worry about, we also have Mercury going retrograde. And, well, you might as well say that he's retrograde now. I mean, there'll be issues of computer problems, information going astray. I always say during a Pluto retrograde, make sure that you get all of your details cleared, and check everything twice. Check everything twice. So that's happening now. We're going to be having the Mercury retrograde period run up until about the middle of August. So, take your time with information, with electronical devices. I wouldn't advise you to go out and buy anything fancy at the moment, because it probably won't work very well. Or you might have some technical issues. So that's going on. So what else is going on? Well, there's been some interesting things going on in the news. We've had Tom Cruise and his wife Katie Holmes saying that they want to divorce because of the whole Scientology issue, and obviously Katie Holmes should have known what she was getting herself into. However, she's kind of waited, I suppose, to the very last minute to try to escape. And unfortunately, what happens in Scientology is that they take children around the age that Suri is now, between 6 or 7, and that's when they actually begin the intense indoctrination. And much of that can be trauma-based as well. So she's trying to protect her, which she rightly needs to do so. So that's going on. And as that's fresh in people's minds, I also want to just bring up this headline that I came across the other day about Minister Farrakhan associating the Nation of Islam with Scientology, which I think is quite funny because well, there's so much to Scientology. We have to do a show on it. It has very dubious beginnings. Aleister Crowley was someone that L. Ron Hubbard looked up to, and Aleister Crowley was quite a sad individual, quite a sick individual. So it's a very intense study, a mystical type of study. They call themselves a religion, but it's an indoctrination. So I found that interesting that Nation of Islam is associating itself with Scientology, and they have trained about 1,000 auditors, from what I understand, who will then go into the field and instruct other people and get them into Scientology. So very interesting. At some point I want to do a show on the Black Boule, which is the hidden group that stands behind many of our black elite leaders. Many of our black elite leaders, of course, are Masons, and they will be recruited into the Black Boule. So it doesn't matter who you are, you will find yourself being approached by the Boule Society if you are a person of importance in the black community. It's a way to control, it's a way to keep people under their thumb. So, you know, there's just so much going on in our world, and you really have to have your head screwed on right, because there's just so much information and so much misinformation, and everybody's after your mind and your soul. So watch out. So tonight I have a very interesting guest who's going to be coming back onto the show with me, Thomas Sheridan, who is an author. He's going to be talking about psychopaths. I had him on a few weeks back and we had some technical issues, and we've managed to sort out those technical issues, but we didn't get the appropriate amount of time with him that we should have had. So he's going to be joining me very shortly, and we're going to be continuing our conversation that we left off the last time he was with me. So I'm going to play a quick track, and I'm going to get Thomas on the line, and when I come back we'll be getting on with the show. So sit back and relax. Alright, so welcome back to Esoteric Discussions with me, your host, Valentine St. Aubin, and I have with me on the line Thomas Sheridan, who is my guest tonight. I'm just going to open up his mic and make sure that we can hear him. Thomas, can you hear me? Thomas, are you there?
Hi, Valentine. It's just a bit low. Hold on a second.
Okay, yeah, just yes, you are coming through low on my headphones. We're just trying something different this time round.
I can hear you fine now.
Okay, you're a bit low on my side, so let me just try to adjust something. Hold on a sec. Let's see if that makes any difference. You there? Can you hear me?
Hi, Valentine. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I think that makes a bit of a difference. You're slightly faint, but I think the quality is good enough where you'll come through okay. That's fine. Okay, so just to let you all know about Thomas, he is an author, and he's the author of Puzzling People, Labyrinth of the Psychopath. And he also has another book that has recently come out which is a follow-up book to his original work, which is Defeated Demons, Freedom from Consciousness, Parasites in Psychopathic Society. Thomas is also an artist, and he's a musician and a public speaker. And you can visit his website as you listen along. You can go to thomassheridanarts.com. So, Thomas, how have you been? Last time we spoke, we were having technical difficulties. Hopefully, we've managed to overcome those for this next show, because I'm looking forward to speaking to you tonight. How has it been? How are you finding life out there, and have you been coming across any new psychopaths lately?
Yeah, it's been very interesting. You know, when I wrote the book, I just didn't have a clue what the reception would be. A part of me was actually wondering if it would actually be extremely hostile, because, you know, I'm not a professional in the sense that I have a degree in psychiatry or clinical psychology. But amazingly, it's been the other way round. The reception has been phenomenal. Even people in the profession have actually even been very enthusiastic and even supportive of what I've done, because quite a few of them have told me off record that it was the book that they, you know, Puzzling People was the book they couldn't write themselves, for obvious reasons, because a lot of these people involved in the field would be in danger of having their reputation or their grants removed from them. So I was surprised that happened. And it was also the fact that I demystified the subject of the psychopath within society and brought it down to a sort of a layperson's language. It was almost like a time whose idea had come, as someone had described it there the other night. And that's very much how it's felt. Now, I have had some strange experiences. I have been covertly targeted by people trying to make friends with me who were psychopathic, just to try and see what they could get a rise out of me. Pathological types. I've had some strange reviews of the book that were, I could tell by the syntax and language used, was written by a psychopath, because they try to sound clever and literal and things like that when they're trying to, you know, impress you. So but that's been the minor. That's been a very, very small aspect of it. I have to say that, I honestly have to say that writing that book was one of the best things I've ever done for myself, and it's just, you know, it's opened up a whole new world for me. That's been mainly positive. It makes me realize how many people out there just, you know, have been damaged by these things and we're waiting for someone to actually tell their story for them.
Yeah. Tell me, because I'm sure you must get this question often, what is the difference between a psychopath and, let's say, a sociopath?
There's no difference. See, I'll give you the history of the word. The etymology is quite interesting. The term psychopath has been around since the late Victorian era. It kind of crept into things like criminal profiling and stuff like that to describe what they used to call a criminal who was morally insane. For instance, like a criminal, or, you know, police and detectives would have been aware of criminals. And people have been arrested who had a sense of guilt of what they did. Okay, they didn't want to they still committed the crime, but it may have been out of necessity or stupidity or a crime of passion. But in the late Victorian era, they recognized there was a certain kind of criminal who engaged in all kinds of crime, from petty larceny all the way up to mass murder, who just didn't have a care. It was just done. There was just no sense of remorse or guilt, and they called them morally insane, or moral imbeciles was a common term as well. Right. And eventually the term psychopath came along, and that was just casually used, not in any kind of formal way, until that's why there's so little about psychopaths written in the work of, say, Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud, because it was just a casual term. And then in 1947, Hervey Cleckley wrote the book The Mask of Sanity, and that was his attempt to clarify, in a scientific understanding, the term psychopath. And that stood with us until Alfred Hitchcock made the movie Psycho, which portrayed not really a psychopath. Norman Bates was more along the lines of a deeply disturbed, out-of-control schizophrenic. But unfortunately, to distinguish from a crazy axe killer schizophrenic from a psychopath, the term sociopath was then derived. But it's exactly the same thing. It doesn't mean, it's no difference. It's just two different names for the same condition.
Because I think a lot of people, if they hear that term psychopath, they immediately think, oh, okay, like psycho, or someone who's like a serial killer, which I suppose psychopaths can be killers, but they don't necessarily have to be killers. That's correct to say. Is that not true?
Sure, absolutely. Ted Bundy and people like that were absolutely psychopaths, but psychopathic killers are extremely rare. Mm-hmm. The overwhelming vast majority of psychopaths are people who live in what we would call normal society, would be on the surface very normal appearing people. Many of them would go through life undetected, except by people who were in close personal relationships with them, who would actually know that this person was a psychopath, or were aware that they indulged in behavior, the whole kind of idea of the house angel, street devil, or people who knew them through work. These individuals who they saw change personalities in an instant to manipulate people. So, that's what most psychopaths are. Most of them are bottom feeders. They're not intelligent enough to rise to be great leaders or politicians or anything like that, or ruthless business leaders. They're swindlers and con artists, even doing things like getting married to put a roof over their head, or things like that. But they all have the same drive in that they don't care. It's just what they want. They're going to get it. They're going to do what it has to take to get there. They're going to enjoy manipulating the individual that they're actually manipulating, or the group, or the country even. And then when they get what they want, and no matter what the cost is, whether it results in death, suicide, misery, social ruin, a person's financial ruin, they just don't care. It's just business with them. And they have no guilt and no remorse. So that's the vast majority of psychopaths. That was the reason why I wanted to write Puzzling People, because I wanted to reclaim the word for its original meaning. Because I was discovering through my research, and especially in the last 5 years or so, that psychopaths hate being called psychopaths, because it's a very bad word for a very bad individual. You cannot water down in the same way you can a narcissist or even a sociopath. A sociopath can actually sound like someone who's a maverick, someone who's a bit of a wild man who does what he wants and doesn't care. I'm a sociopath. But you can't do that. You can't talk about a psychopath that way. It's like it has the same emotional and psychological resonance as pedophile, rapist. So I wanted to bring the word back, and it seems to be definitely coming back. A lot of people are starting to use it more and more in the context in which I mean it. Most psychopaths like being called narcissistic or narcissist, which is a ridiculous term. It's just a ridiculous term made up by the Diagnostic and Statistic Manuals of the American Psychiatric Association. Calling a psychopath, and I know I say this all the time, but I have to get this out there. Calling a psychopath a narcissist is like calling a rapist a selfish lover. We need to term these people are not complicated, difficult people who are difficult geniuses, and these are ruthless predators who cause untold misery in human society, from swindling people, from breaking their hearts for a laugh, for marrying them just to get their money and then destroying their psychology as soon as the wedding ring is on the finger. And these people are so unbelievably dangerous that they actually leave a trail of horrific and enormous social, personal, and political ruin. And indeed, suicide. Mostly, even though I said earlier on that most psychopaths are not killers, well, a lot of them would be killers, in that the people that they've actually destroyed emotionally and psychologically would have went on to kill themselves.
Yeah, because they do mean to harm you, don't they, when you do come across them? Yeah.
Murder by suicide, they call it. So this is why I want to get that message out there, because in recent years they've almost been glamorizing this type of individual, TV,
that's a good way to say
and so on. And this is what we have to stop. We have to stop this, and we have to stop, because they want to humanize the monster and dehumanize the human. And myself, through my own looking at the world, I just didn't want to live in a world where being a ruthless, cold-blooded, manipulative, devious predator should be looked upon as being glamorous and idealistic for a modern person. But just by how many people have bought my book and written to me, it seems to be that most of us are the same.
Mm-hmm. Thomas, tell us a bit about your past. I mean, obviously there's always a journey that someone goes on when they write a book, and you've touched a bit on some of your interest in this whole area, but you have an interesting professional history. Tell us a bit more about your background, your working background.
Well, I grew up on the north side of Dublin in a tough neighbourhood in the 1970s and 80s, and inner city high-rise, typical 1960s high-rise council estate. And it was a pretty tough place, and yet the people that I lived with and in these apartments and in these tower blocks, I don't think I ever encountered one psychopathic individual. It wasn't until I went into officialdom, and by that I mean my education, when I went into primary school, that the first individuals I ever encountered that seemed to take a sadistic pleasure in torturing people were certain school teachers.
Yeah.
They just like bullying the children.
Yeah.
And especially as these were poor children in a working class disadvantaged neighborhood. So it was almost like there were some teachers there who actually felt that it was they had a license to humiliate and degrade them further. And I could never understand as a child, and even growing up as a teenager, what was their payoff. What did they gain from actually torturing a 10-year-old, humiliating them in front of the class and things like that? And then as I got older, I started to notice that these people, when I was a teenager and got jobs working in restaurants and stuff like that, in the kitchen, that there'd be someone in there who'd have a strange personality. They would seem different, and this is where the intuition was kicking in. This is a very important aspect in this whole subject of dealing with psychopathology. And then I played in bands a lot, and then I went to New York when I was 19, and I had a great time there playing in bands. And again, through these people who are like managers and promoters, I would meet this same personality type, very cold, but also could be very charming as well. But I almost felt very uncomfortable around them. They seemed to have no shame, and they would if you had a glass eyeball, they would rub it out of your head without thinking twice. And then I just thought, well, that's the music industry. That's just how the music industry is. It attracts. There's big books there. It's like any showbiz thing. It attracts a lot of nasty people. And then I went to college and I studied graphic design, and when I got out, I went to work for Wall Street investment banks. And then I realized that this kind of mentality that exists in these individuals that I met, well, they also existed in a whole culture. And this is when I first met people, one person in particular, who openly admitted to me in a kind of a jokey way, like we talked about the sociopath earlier on, that he was a diagnosed psychopath, and he had been actually tested after causing mayhem for his family, and he was working as a Wall Street hedge fund young manager. Mm-hmm. And so from that moment when he actually said the term, I am a psychopath, after I stopped laughing, it became this thing that always stuck in the back of my mind. Well, what are these psychopaths? Who are they? How do they work? And I think I read books like, Helter Skelter by Vincent Bugliosi, I think his name is. Mm-hmm. He was an Italian-American writer who wrote about the Manson family. Yeah. And there was, I was reading that book, and there was people, in that book. There were, not so much Manson, but the ones in that group reminded me of a psychopath and the dynamic, where he didn't actually do the killing himself, but he got the other people like Squeaky Foam and all those types in the gang.
And made them take the fall, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I still have my original copy of that book, and that was the first book I probably wrote to make me try and understand what was going on. And from that point on, I collected everything from articles, magazine clippings, newspaper articles, anytime I could get something from the New York Public Library in terms of a report. And then I discovered, after a good few years of assembling this stuff, that there was a vast body of information on this subject that nobody was being taught anything about. It was being hidden from us. And I wanted to know why I didn't know this. And it's been actually confirmed to me since then, having met, when I was recently talking in London, some psychiatrists who told me they were not even taught one single thing about psychopaths while they were in college, in university. So there seemed to me also, as well as this vast ignorance, an agenda to keep this information hushed up.
Yeah.
Because people would eventually realize that not only was their ex-husband psychopathic, or their ex-sister, or their son-in-law psychopathic, but also our leaders are psychopathic. Our corporations are run by psychopaths. And so that was one of the things that drove me to this as well. So in a professional sense, that's how I came on this journey.
Yeah, it's very interesting what you've said there, and also, you know, you have the individuals that are, as you rightly say, psychopathic, and you also have corporations. Of course, there was that documentary, a very good movie that came out quite a few years ago now, called The Corporation, that you know, sort of went into the terminology of what a psychopath is, but analyzing it within the context of corporations and how you know they operate, you know, and as you're saying, these, you know, these individuals who gather themselves together into these corporations are psychopaths, and they're out for certain things. You know, I know that you came off of a talking tour recently with Max Kaiser and Ian R. Crane and Brian Gerrish and a few others about financial terrorism. How are you finding this whole situation with what's going on in the banking system in particular, and your own research with the psychopath? How are you finding all of that, and do you think that the average person is waking up to these types of individuals and getting it on a bigger level?
Oh, absolutely. No doubt about it. It's a very different thing than even it was a year ago. That financial terrorism tour was held in a the first one was in quite a nice hotel in Dublin, and a very nice one in London. But when I went into the hotel in Dublin, I just expected the usual sort of alternative, you know, folks that show up at all these events. Well, when I walked out on that stage, I looked out at the audience, and I was amazed at the demographic of the audience. It was very much, we had all the usual sort of alternative people and activists there, you know, the old guard. But among them, with them, were obvious people who were professionals. These were upper middle class and middle class people who had lost everything when the Irish economy was sabotaged. Yeah, they lost their pensions, they lost their investments, and they're asking for questions. And this is changing, and it was the exact same demographic in London. Manchester was a bit different. It was more of but it was still great. But there was still a few people in there too as well who were newcomers to this scene. The psychopaths who are running the financial system, and the psychopaths in government who have taken away the regulations to allow them to do this, have accidentally done what every psychopath does, either if accidentally, they reveal themselves. Because they get cocky, they get arrogant, and ultimately they're self-destructive in their own kind of way, because there's an internal sense of chaos, and internal chaos is the only way, that's the way to describe it, in the psychopathic mind. And when they get a rush, and when they get this, you know, this success, then they want the next one. Then they want the next one. They're like a junkie looking for a fix.
That's what they say. I mean, you know, these people, you know, is like this kind of influence of power is like cocaine for them. It's never enough, and they want more and more and more, and they can never be satisfied either.
Yeah, they've got an itch that can never be scratched. They've got this internal hunger that they have to the last day of their lives. But what was also interesting about what happened at these events on the financial terrorism tour was that there was not only the profile of the audience of a certain, you know, social, economic background, but also an age group. These would have been people who are now 40s and 50s, who would have seen movies like Wall Street back in the 80s and remembered the character that Michael Douglas played in that movie, the guy Greco, when he said things like greed is good, and even the lines, and there was one scene in that line where Charlie Sheen says he wants to go work for him, and his friend turns around, I would never work for him because he's had an empathy bypass. So you see, this is what's happening. People are remembering that, like, they're remembering something that they've almost forgotten, that there's a segment of the human race that has, well, I don't even consider them human. I consider them a subspecies. Yeah. There's a subspecies of the human race, a mutation, that just will do anything to get what they want, and they're remembering again. It's not so much they're they've forgotten, or they didn't know, they're remembering. In 2010, I was in Dublin. I got talking to this African shaman who was at an event there. Amazing guy. And he just asked me what I was doing. And I said, I write books and talk about psychopaths. And he went, psychopaths, yeah. I know all about them. And I asked him, why are there so few psychopaths in indigenous cultures? And he said, well, it's because... it is what he called it. He says psychopaths are the demon world trying to invade this world.
Absolutely, yeah, I agree with that.
And he said, and then I said, well, why do we have so many of them in the West? And he says, it's because you hate yourselves. And it's one of the most profound things I've ever heard.
Yeah, I like
he
that.
says you hate yourselves because of advertising and social engineering, and that has opened this door for this psychopathic consciousness to invade the Western person. And that was, even though I came from this thing in the scientific way and the psychology thing, as much as I could, I was never going to discount that there may be some aspect like that to it. But I can honestly say that's where I'm heading now.
Yeah.
Like I can actually see there's as much sense in that. There's as much sense in thinking of it in that way as there is in terms of psychology and neurochemistry or anything like that. They work together. You can understand the psychopathic condition when you consider all the factors, not just the scientific, psychological, psychiatry, neurochemistry, neurological, but when you factor in the allegorical and mythological aspects of psychopaths and how they've been portrayed through myth and legend, through history, in all the cultures, coupled with things like, just understanding it from a sort of the concept of the collective unconscious in terms of this. It's true. It's like I've actually, I've done so many events now, and I've listened to a lot of other speakers talking about all kinds of things, and it's now, to me, it's a spiritual war almost. It's a war between the empathic consciousness and the psychopathic consciousness. The Battle of Armageddon has begun, and it's begun in the domain of human consciousness. And for the first time ever, I think now we're fighting back, since we've stopped being indigenous people. You understand?
Yeah.
Like, wherever our ancestors came from, mine would have been Druids or whatever like that. Since those times, the awakened community, what we have now, is the first salvo that we fired back at them.
Mm-hmm. And I just love everything that you're saying, and I'm a believer in what that shaman said as well. And I can very much see it. There's a shadow element that exists within the world that we live in. There's what you can see and there's what you can't see, and depending on how you're wired is how this shadowy influence can come into you or can be penetrated into our consciousness and the way that the world is governed. And I'm finding, and I know of course you can see it too very, very, very clearly, the television shows, the movies, everything is about a vampire or some kind of demon chaser, or it's getting so in your face now that there's no running away from it. There is a definite push of darkness coming into mainstream entertainment, and it's cool to be a vampire, it's cool to be these types of things, it's cool to be a parasite, I guess, if you could even say. And there's something inherently wrong there, but not many people, not everybody is getting it like that.
Yeah, well, when I was in my late teens, early 20s, I played in goth bands and stuff like that. And the goth scene then was very different than it is now. It was more like a Victorian melodramatic dress-up thing.
Absolutely,
more
yeah.
along the kind of English romantic kind of thing. A bit of like powdered makeup to make you look, meets Hammer horror films from the 60s. So it was very, very innocent. Very innocent. Yeah. Now when you look at like goth websites or goth culture magazines, it's young girls with their throats slashed in public toilets, or they've been eviscerated and their guts are hanging out. What's supposed to be their guts hanging out beside a urinal. And this is what you're talking about. This is the psychopathic infection. We have to think of the psychopath as we would a public health issue. It's a disease we must get rid of by isolating ourselves from it. Not only by getting the psychopaths out of our lives, of our personal lives, and not complying with the psychopathic control grid, but also decontaminating our consciousness of the kind of things you're talking about. Get rid of that bloody TV. I mean, those vampire shows are absolutely an allegory of psychopaths. In fact, it's right. You see, it ties in perfectly with what Carl Jung spoke about. How, culture is the is the representation of the unresolved shadow of the human psyche.
Mm-hmm.
And the unresolved shadow of the human condition today, these unresolved, issues we have outstanding, is our thus far failure to deal with the psychopathic subspecies amongst us. We have not come to realize that issue yet. It's happening now. And when I saw those when you say, okay, it's dark, well, what it's really showing is a collective undercurrent is coming up from the human condition to warn us indirectly. Now, the psychopaths who run the networks and make these shows will try to make it look like these things are cool.
Mm-hmm.
But again, they'll push it too far to the point where these shows aren't even worth watching anymore.
Yeah.
They've been doing it for years, though, with things like James Bond. James Bond is a psychopath.
Yeah.
He has no remorse. He just, all the women around him dying, he just used them and doesn't care.
Mm-hmm.
And you see, and this is like, they've managed to keep that on the wraps for so long, but it's changing. It's changing, Valentine. And the reason why it's changing is, again, they pushed it too far. When you have like shops in America selling crotchless panties to preteens,
mm-hmm.
and they honestly think they're going to get away with that, they won't. So see what's happening. All this, the way it's getting worse now. What they're really doing is, these are rats backed into a corner. And the only way out, the only way they can escape is to drag us down to the sewer, to their psychopathic, demonic consciousness, down to their level. But it's not going to happen. It'll happen with maybe the young and impressionable for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But everywhere I look now, people are waking up.
They're starting to fight back.
The TV ratings are horrific now. People, they're just not getting the numbers they used to get. So things are changing. But this is a very important pivot point. It's very important that we hold on to our humanity and hold on to our spirituality. Even things like this desire to remove our spirituality from us through things like Richard Dawkins. This is also part of the agenda as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
To make us believe we're soulless robots.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have to hang on to all these things that make us human. The experience that you and I, as individuals, humans, have is the most valid experience in this universe, because we're the only ones having it. And therefore we have the right to protect our consciousness and then use our consciousness to create, because that's the way out of this. We have to be as creative as they are. They're devious, but we're creative. And if we can create a way out of this, and this is another part of my work I go deeply into, this is the other side of my work, is this sort of the idea of using human consciousness to actually elevate us to the next stage of evolution, which I believe is coming, and I believe this is how evolution has always happened.
Mm-hmm.
You've had an explosion of the frontal cortex when writing and art was discovered. I now believe we're on the cusp of another one, where we're actually going to improve as a species. And I think subconsciously, and maybe even consciously, the psychopaths know this, and they're trying to hold us back.
I agree. I want us to take a break, Thomas, and let you rest your vocal cords just for a little bit. We're going to play a song, and I want to pick up where we've just left off, because the information that you are sharing is absolutely vital, and it's very fascinating, and I'm loving all of it. But we're going to take a break, so I'm going to play a song. It's Seal, and it's called Crazy. And when I come back, we're going to pick up with Thomas Sheridan. All right, so welcome back to Esoteric Discussions with me, your host, Valentine St. Aubin. And I've been having a fascinating conversation with Thomas Sheridan, who is an author, and we've been talking about psychopaths. If you really like if you're connecting with what he's saying, I would highly recommend that you check out his website. He's a very interesting man. He's an author, and he's an artist and musician, and you can learn more about him from his website at thomassheridanart.com. I'm just going to open his mic back up. Hi Thomas, you still there?
I'm still here.
Excellent. So before we were rudely interrupted by our break, you were talking about the humanity overcoming a lot of this darkness that is being imposed on us. And I really would like to get your take on where you think, you already have slightly gone into this, but I would like you to go a bit further as to where you think we are going to go. Because obviously, in the alternative community and in the spiritual community, we're talking very much about the times that we're in, and that there is some kind of an awakening going on. Certainly maybe not by everybody, but enough numbers anyway for people to start asking questions who may never have thought in certain ways before. How do you find How are you? Where do you think this is all going? And how long do you think it can take for the masses to maybe rise up? Because you are right, we are at a crossroads with things, and people are losing money. Every time these stock markets go up and down, someone's losing something, and they are being affected. So, from your point of view, where do we stand with this whole awakening issue?
Well, I was thinking about it the other day. In fact, I even drew a graphic to try and understand it. I wanted to understand where the human race, stood at this point in history. And people go to a website, they'll actually see it. But I just started to think about, what's the current state of humanity? I didn't want to be snobbish about it, like I'm judging people or anything like that. But we know for a fact from all the official figures that 4% of the race of the humanity, well, they're not part of it, are psychopathic. So that leaves 96% of us who are not psychopathic. We're all empathic on some level. Mm-hmm. And we only need a small amount of people to actually push us out of this quagmire that we're in. Right now, we probably have, for the first time in my life, more than 1% of the human race was what I would call self-actualized, in that they actually understand what they are, who they are, where they're going, and what they want from a life, based on their own intuitive, personal insight, rather than something that's been handed to them by authority figures. You understand?
Mm-hmm. They're not, indoctrination.
Yeah, they're not going through life because they think, like a way our grandparents did, parents did. They're doing it on their own terms. This is something that started probably in the 60s, but now it's actually it's moving closer to 2% now. It's really moving now. And then with that, you would have what you would call the sheeple. I don't just mean that in a degenerative way. That's just the best word I can use for them. Mm-hmm. People who they're the tax animals of society. They're just used to pay taxes and support the system. They don't particularly think deeply about things. But within them is still a significant percentage of what we might call people who haven't woke up yet. They're not ready for this information yet. Mm-hmm. But they will get there in their own time once we don't force them into it. If you can get them and that group together, which ironically is also the group that are mostly targeted by psychopaths, we could have a completely different world. And it's actually happening. It's happening slowly, but it's happening. And where it all began, you talked about the awakening and all this stuff. What the awakening really was the internet. The internet became a sort of an exterior brain of human beings. And that's what the actual system wanted. But they never expected it to develop in the way it actually has. They thought that there'd always be sort of a marginal number of people, a small number of people, who what they would call kooks and nuts and oddballs and weirdos who would question society, but that would never actually become anything other than sort of the stereotypical image of sort of burnt out hippies or conspiracy mm-hmm. theorists and ever.
Yeah, they
have gotten the fright of their life to see housewives in Minnesota talking about vaccines, farmers in Cornwall talking about sodium fluoride in the water. Doctors and engineers and educated people, what we'd call them, in New York or London or Dublin or Brussels or Paris or any major city, talking about how maybe science is not as real as we've been told it has been. They're discovering, they're looking at things like the climate change stuff and realizing that a lot of the science behind that is not actually science. It's a political thing.
Yeah,
it's political. It's not scientific at all. So and that's what's happening now. This is the internet has done this, and this has terrified them. This has terrified the control system. So, although we may have the obvious, what we'd call the truthers or the awakened group or whatever, who are very vocal and very visibly out there, this is not to say there isn't a vast, and I believe it's an absolutely vast number of people who think about these things, talk about these things that you and I are talking about, but they're doing it at home. they're still going about their normal lives. They're being, nice people doing their thing, but they're aware that things have gone wrong, and they're aware that maybe the ones that they were told were kooks and nuts and conspiracy theorists may have a point about quite a lot of things that they talk about. And I can tell you, I know this for a fact because they write me emails and letters constantly. They read my book, and they'll say things like, I often thought about, why when I'd look at someone like Tony Blair, he didn't look human to me or something like that.
Yeah.
Or why when I looked at that politician who came to, when I saw the local politician holding the hands of women on chemotherapy, promising them that he wouldn't close the local cancer clinic down, only to find out later on that he was the one drafting the bill to have it fast-tracked and closed down. And they say things to me like, after I read your book, now the world makes sense. So that's really what's happening. That's what the Awaken movement is. It's allowing the internet is allowing people to finally make sense of a world that that was so insane and made no sense that they just threw their hands up and they forgot about it, and they just got on with their lives rather than deal with it, like cognitive dissonance. That's all changing now, and this is why you have the likes of that Rockefeller guy in America making that announcement before the U.S. Senate saying the worst thing we ever did was give people the internet.
Yeah.
And he wasn't joking. He was absolutely.
Oh yeah, he's dead serious. Yeah.
Yeah, he was in a state of anguish. So this is because this fiefdom, these robber barons, these elitists, for the first time in history, probably ever, not since the time of Babylon anyway, in the West, are absolutely terrified. They're absolutely terrified that they won't be able to control the herd anymore. So, but this is where the danger lies as well. They are very likely to cause kind of false issue around a kind of a thing like a disease or a pandemic in order to implement greater social controls. So this is what they'll try and do. So the race between us getting onto them and them trying to pull it off is now crucial. So we have to make sure shows like yourself and everyone we know, don't worry if people laugh at you. If you see something that's articulated well, but not somebody running down the street with a megaphone screaming, but somebody who's articulating the point well in a short video or a short statement, share it on your Facebook wall, put it on Twitter. Just send it to somebody.
Yeah, expose them.
If they laugh at it, they laugh at it. But what is seen cannot be seen, and what is heard cannot be unheard. And at some point in the future, something will happen, and in politics, in banking, and then people will say, I saw a video. My friend sent me a video years ago about how the financial system was all fake and not on real money, and I laughed at it at the time. And now he's right, and so that's why we have to keep on fighting. Absolutely. We have to keep on spreading that information in a dignified, intelligent way. And if people laugh at us, if people make fun of you, well, that's not a problem. You just move on, and you just keep on doing it. And I think I'm very hopeful actually about the future, because what I've seen in the last 10 years has blown my mind in terms of, like, I used to think for years that I was the only person in the world like me, and now I realise that I'm actually part of a huge minority. I bet you feel the same way, I bet.
Yeah, I do, because people like us, 10, 50, well, 20, I mean, I'm giving my age away here, but, 20 years ago, this type of information that we're into was, there was no internet, so you had to go and do the hard research, read the books, educate yourself, answer the questions in your own mind, try to talk with like-minded people, and, we did feel very much alone. And times have changed where this information is now easily at your fingertips through YouTube and what have you. And I always say, if people laugh at you, I take it as a compliment, because at the end of the day, you'll be laughing together, because they will finally ask those other questions to get them to the next step, and then therefore open their eyes a bit further. So never take it the wrong way or feel ashamed in any way, but it's always very refreshing to speak to somebody else who's in the field trying to push the boundary. And Thomas, we run out of time, and I've been absolutely fascinated with what you shared with me tonight, and with the audience as well, and you've done it in such an eloquent way. So I want to thank you so much for being a guest on my show tonight and being with me this evening.
Well, I appreciate that, Valentine. Thank you for the opportunity to come on to talk to you and your listeners.
No problem. And I'll have to get you back at another time because, I mean, obviously, you know, you've written your follow-up book to the first book, and we really haven't been able to get into those levels as well because there's so much to be said. I mean, I've seen Alistair Campbell trying to recharacterize himself now and claim that he was suffering from depression, which was why he was so awful and bad. You've heard it as well, and that's a whole nother level, and this is a game that's being played, so this goes on and on and on. So
can I just make a quick announcement before I go?
Yep.
I know just for anyone in Peterborough and in the Stevenage and the surrounding area there, not too far away, on Saturday the 21st of July, I'll be speaking in Dunstable.
Okay.
So I'll be doing a talk there with Ian and Brian and some other people. It'll be a music and information festival.
Oh, excellent.
And if you go to our website, you'll see that. I forget what the festival is called, but it's in Dunstable on the 21st.
Okay.
So people, that's not too far from where you guys are. So if you were interested in here seeing me talk more about this live, I'll log and meet me and say hello, and you know we'll get through this together.
Excellent. That's good to hear. Well, I want to wish you all the best, and I'm going to close your mic now. And thank you so much for joining me, Thomas, and good luck with everything. Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right then.
Good luck to you too. Bye bye.
Okay, guys, that's it. I hope you enjoyed the show this evening. I've tried to make it as interesting as I always do, but it's time for me to go. So, as I always say, until next time, keep your eyes on the stars.